name is Peter Alcure. I'm the CFO of Aura Inhale, and my background is purely finance. Um, and I've dealt with startups for a good deal of my career besides working in financial services. And my good friend who is essentially the backbone of this technology is Dr. Stephen Boyd. He approached me some years ago in a project that was in its infancy with regard to inhalation and vaping of various compounds. At the time, nicotine vaping was just getting started, and that's not really something we were interested in pursuing. We were looking effectively to pursue more healthy alternatives, non-nicotine related compounds. The issue is, frankly, that some of the more healthy compounds, as an example, vitamins, are not necessarily completely, when I say solvable, dissolvable in the standard carrier fluids of the vaping universe, which is namely propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. So Dr. Boyd set out to come out with our own carrier fluid that would enhance the solubility as well as not be a copycat to the rest of the industry and just try and effectively get these healthier substances into the fluid and make it vapable. Dr. Boyd was successful in creating our own carrier fluid, which we did file a patent on, and then we filed that patent globally thereafter, which allows us to achieve much higher than average concentrations of vitamins, caffeine, other compounds to put in vaping format. Along the way, I would say that the scientists also took that a step further in that everybody knows that some substances are not water soluble, namely oil type fluids, but we were able to expand our, say, tricks of the trade with our patented carrier fluid to expand into some, but not all oil-based compounds. And that's ongoing. We're introduced or asked about new substances. Can you put it in vapid format? The research is ongoing since the universe is infinite with regard to what people are interested in. And that's what kind of really brings this all together with what Relics Life is going to be doing, bringing namely new ideas from the member community to us to allow us to essentially do the experiments, see if we can come up with new products that actually the community and the marketplace is looking for. I could go on for a while with regard to this, but I would probably open the floor to some questions so we can I can get some feedback as to what the community is interested in looking for with regard to the company, our current products, and the direction we're heading with Relics in particular.
Sure. Okay, so as all of our participants know, this is a town hall format, and a town hall really relies on your questions. So we're going to give you a minute right now to go into the Telegram chat, and if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please type them up so that we can ask them to Peter and he'll be able to answer them. And if there's anything that's more appropriate for me or for TM to answer, we can do that as well. Okay, so we have one question here from Jason, and Jason says, why did you choose the Relics platform over other possibilities to secure funding?
I've been working with Keith Hilden in Squawkonomics for quite a while, and Keith brought this idea to us, as he thought that this was an ideal platform. As prior to that, frankly, we had nothing to do with the crypto universe at all. This was a unique idea brought to us by Keith, and we've had a great working relationship, over the last couple of years. So, of course, I would want to expand that further on this platform.
Excellent. Derek has a question, and he's asking, who is your main competition?
Certainly in the United States, we've seen a lot of copycats that have attempted to come out with competing products next to ours. Certainly companies like Vitamin Vape or NutraVape, they're on Amazon. There's a couple of them out there, but they're all using the standard, as I mentioned in the beginning, propylene glycol vegetable glycerin base, which frankly gives them a major limitation with regard to what and in what amount they can actually dissolve a compound into. And I'd say, having checked out the competition and knowing who's doing the work here, they don't have a team of PhDs like we do that are sitting there that actually are, classically trained, so to speak, to run through hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments to get these things to be in the quantities that are effective.
Right. So I think something to emphasize would be the fact that Aura Inhale is not just taking something that already exists and making it look nicer. Aura Inhale, the technology behind it, is doing something in a completely new way.
Yes, exactly. We're looking to be unique. To put out products that are most importantly safe and effective into the marketplace, but be unique as well. Essentially, if you had followed our story, and I know we're new to the community, a lot of times when we introduce a new product, suddenly now the competition comes out within a month and tries to effectively copy it, similar ingredients, similar flavors, and not too much we can do about it, but we know that ours is more effective than everybody else's because we're using a different carrier fluid, so it allows us to ultimately put out something in much higher concentrations than everybody else.
So even if someone came out with the same type of product, let's say hypothetically vitamin D, for instance, their way of having an inhalable vitamin D would be molecularly dissimilar from Aura. So even though it would say the same thing on the packaging, that it was still an inhalable vitamin D, really at its core, it's a very different process and technology.
Absolutely, no question about it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, so Josh Seaton's wondering what the retail price per unit is.
It varies slightly, somewhere between $15 to $20. That's currently what's out there in the United States.
Great. And are these reusable units in any way? How does it work?
No, they're currently all disposable.
Disposable. Got it. Yeah. So Curry asks us, how can one preserve the right for distribution, and how does this work?
Well, I mean, everything we do is via, legal paperwork. There would be a distributor's contract, a distributor pricing schedule, specified territories and terms. This has all been well laid out and gone over. So that all comes down to lawyers, and it's already been set up and established and ready to go for the community.
Great. So Max Weber asks, are there any products besides Viagra that would be foreseeable in the future?
Look, the universe is open. That's essentially part of the purpose of opening up this to the community is bring an idea to us, and we'll work on it. We do have actually probably about 5 or 6 products that we have developed that have not been introduced as of yet, namely because of some restrictions with regard to selling it online. Just to give you some ideas, they're called smart drugs, but they're technically not drugs. They're compounds like Noapept or Piracetam are already developed and ready for the market. Those are things that are coming in the future, for sale globally.
Excellent. Interesting. So those are nootropics, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
As well as we also now have a CBD product.
Oh, someone just asked about that. Could you go into that a little more?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is something we're very proud of. That CBD is an oil-based molecule, but our carrier fluid is water-based, and we set the scientists to task, and they were able to put that in the CBD in our water-based molecule and make it vapable at reasonably high quantities, with regard to the substance, and not have that nasty taste as CBD currently is in vapable form, but it's a sticky, oily fluid that a lot of users don't like the actual taste of.
So Michael actually has a question about the carrier, and he asked, what is the carrier and how has it been tested in terms of safety and how it's handled by the lungs?
Sure. I'd rather not to go into the scientific molecules with regard to the carrier fluid, but I will tell you that it is an alternative of a sugar-based molecule, and there is some science behind that. I will say this: the strength of Aura is that this group of scientists taps the vast amount of medical literature that's out there globally. So if someone comes up with an idea or something to add, we literally go to the medical archives, abstracts, and start reading patent information or medical health testing. Because, as I said before, the most important thing to us is safety. We're never going to put out a product that could be harmful to anyone or, in quantities that potentially could be harmful. So when you ask about safety, we're going back and looking at substances, compounds that we're using that have health and safety data associated with them already, but for a different use, and then applying that towards our technology.
Excellent. Josh was wondering what type of flavors these come in.
Right now, let me see. There's coffee, raspberry. One of our products is a green tea extract. Another one is blueberry. So for the most part, we're not really limited with regard to flavors. And if the community had ideas with regard to flavors going forward, we're certainly open to that. I will say, though, that depending on what's in there, sometimes, say, the lighter fruity flavors are not as great relative to the compound that's being added. As an example, green tea extract pretty much overpowers just about everything. So if you need to flavor it with something that's equally or stronger with regard to that, to make sure that the inhalation experience is good.
Interesting. Crypto has a question here. He said, do you have bioequivalence studies done for this formulation? And I'm thinking that he's talking about the carrier fluid. But Crypto, if I'm wrong about that, please chime in. Anyway, do you have bioequivalence studies done for this formulation in compliance to US FDA requirements for new dosage forms?
Well, here's the thing, right? First off, we should start at the beginning. The most difficult problem in this field is that you can't quantify an inhalation or a puff, right? Not with these, quote, current, we'll call them disposable retail devices that are on the marketplace. So if we were talking about something medical grade, I don't know if we necessarily want to get into it, but as far as regulating inhalation and dosages with regard to a medicine, that's a whole separate field. That's not something that would be on the disposable units platform. With regard to the FDA, currently everything that we are putting out there falls under the 1996 guidelines with regard to a supplement, or there is no RDA with regard to what is being delivered, so you don't need to quantify it with regard to FDA compliance. The Viagra, that's something we would never introduce in the United States, namely because even though it's coming off patent, I'm sure Pfizer will figure out some way to get it back on. So that would be exclusively outside the United States. And again, that would be the type of thing where honestly, we would only put it in safe dosage amounts, not on the higher end, even though we have the capability to do so, because essentially safety first.
Excellent. So we have a follow-up question from Jason, who had asked a question before about why you chose to partner with Relics Life. He wants to know, why didn't Aura Inhale choose to secure funding from companies or even governments? And he says that he's talking about the UK Ministry of Defense, and rather chose to secure funding with the Relics platform. So what were the advantages that Relics Life offers over the other funding possibilities?
That's a great question. Obviously, Aura didn't start with zero money and suddenly develop products. So we do have some investors associated with the company. But in terms of expanding it further, I kind of like the Relics platform, and I would relate it with regard to our ambitions with regard to the company. Private investors didn't necessarily believe that inhalables are scalable, meaning if you look at it from a venture cap perspective, okay, we're going to give you, $5 million. Are we going to get a 10x on that? Well, I believe you can, but having large investors commit that type of capital at this point is something that we honestly haven't pursued to a great degree because, frankly, my background is finance, and we would never give up, control or, better than 50% of the company in exchange for, expanding globally so early on, so to speak. Personally, my perspective as CFO, Relics has a huge potential upside. And, we can grow with them. That's why, I like having them as a partner, get in early stage and essentially use the platform and grow together.
One of the things I also think that Relics Life can offer is the knowledge of the community. We have a very diverse community and a lot of different ideas, and I think a lot of these ideas will help shape future Aura products.
Oh, I totally agree.
Mohammed asks us, does the CBD vape have a release date?
Honestly, it's ready to go. It's a situation where that's not something that we would be allowed to sell on Amazon, um, but we are launching our new website uh, most likely mid next week, and that product would be put out at that time to be available for sale also.
Awesome. Michael was asking, what products are ready for market that are not listed on the Oro website right now?
Certainly the two nootropics. So you have to take a look here. Honestly, I think that it's going to just come down to a discussion of which ones we want to put out. Certainly the CBD, the two nootropics would come out. We do have a complete vitamin line that may or may not come out. You mentioned vitamin D before. That was actually the first product that we developed.
Oh, interesting. So Josh was wondering how long it takes to get a new product from concept to market, like an overall rough timeline.
It really depends. If we start from the beginning and say that a new idea is presented, we're going to bring that idea to the science team, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to check for solubility studies. Some things are very water soluble, some are not, surprisingly. Even some vitamins are not. So I would say within the first week or so, we'd have an idea about generally this is going to be an easy one or this is going to be, a bit more difficult. So with regard to development time, it's kind of a sliding scale because, one thing will say is this is not new for us. We have done this now with regard to development for a couple of years. So ultimately, there's a lot of, we're going to call it tricks of the trade for solubility enhancement and even flavorants that enhance solubility that we have discovered over this experimentation time to allow us to essentially fit the pieces of the puzzle together. Because besides first looking at the solubility that's known, they actually go and they look at it on a molecular level and they're going to say, okay, there's 3 carbons here, such and such, this backbone of the chain, and then look at our library, so to speak, of what's been done previously and start, so the experiments don't become random. It's already somewhat targeted to say, okay, you know what? This has worked before. Why don't we start here and see what the results are? And then, to go to 1.0, 1.1, and so on, such as many as it takes. So, development time is going to vary. It really depends. Could be a month, could be 3 months. Generally, water soluble is much easier than oil soluble. And some we could say, probably tell you within the first 2 weeks after they've looked at it, well, that's just not possible at this point.
So what are things that aren't possible right now?
At this point, amino acids, they are soluble, but they don't work as an inhalable very well. Mainly they taste terrible, horrible. That might be an area that we need greater development work on. The other thing is certainly things like hormones and I know there's always been a lot of questions about insulin. I'd have to put that out to the team if they really wanted to tackle that, because the thing about insulin is, A, it needs to be delivered in an extremely precise dose, and that varies per user, and B, it's a very, very delicate molecule, so it needs to be in a stable format over a period of time. Something I should mention, with all our products is everything goes through shelf stability testing. And that goes back to the safety part of it. And that would go for something new as well. It's great that we develop it, but essentially sitting in the refrigerator in the lab is under pristine conditions. Once you put it in a vape pen and stick it in your pocket and go drive to the beach and see how it is the next day, these type of things are just as important as the development, which people generally don't think about, but everything you encounter in the retail marketplace has gone through some type of shelf stability testing to make sure that the product not only works, but it works a month from now.
Interesting. So speaking about retailers, what are the current retail outlets to purchase, and what plans are there for expansion to other retailers?
Yeah, currently the product is available on Amazon as well as eBay, and there are some brick and mortar retailers in New York that offer the product. But we're really looking to get this out into the marketplace through a distributor network globally, as we just don't have the personnel to essentially get this out on a brick and mortar level, say throughout the United States or even certainly the rest of the world. But I'm sure that community members will think about other online platforms, and as they come in with regard to these, funding these projects, that's something that's available. Obviously, it's got to be reviewed where and not make sure there's not overlap with regard to territories and such. But the world is out there as the opportunity.
Awesome. Josh has a question. He wants to know, what is the typical cost for, say, a vitamin D inhaler? For example, how many vapes do you get per X dollars?
Typically, the units will last about a month. Now, again, since you can't technically quantify an inhalation, per person, that's obviously going to vary. But as far as the retail goes, I believe it's about $16 US. But something to consider is that, just to give you a general idea, all vitamins, and this is, say, the major differentiating point between us and everything else besides the fluid, all vitamins that you take in oral format currently have a salt-based backbone. Meaning, if you go and you look at the bottle, it's not the pure vitamin. It's a vitamin and a salt put in pill form, and from a digestive perspective, the body does not handle that well. The poor absorption of vitamins is well known. Our vitamin D is in the pure form. That when we started in the vaping universe, every vitamin we wanted to put in, we wanted it in crystal form, if it's obtainable to get that, and put the purest form without the salt into the fluid itself. Essentially, that allowed us to bring the dosages up tremendously. So for the vitamin D vape, as an example, you really don't need a lot with regard to your daily usage of it. Say 3 vapes in the morning, and effectively you're done.
So I think that would answer, Jason, your question. So your question was, what is the difference between this process in comparison to other ones? And the difference would be that the other processes use a salt-based form, whereas this one does not.
Yes, that's correct.
Let's see. Reese, I see your question. This question would more fall into my field rather than Peter's, about Will it be priced fixed, as in 500 RLXI for an inhalable, or 19.99, and then convert that to RLXI? I don't think that we intend to fix the amount for it, but this is something that is still being discussed. I would say that your second option is the much more likely one whenever we do make a final announcement about that. So Max asked, how are you tackling the inhalation dosage? So this is something that we talked about before, and it seems to be an interesting aspect to people. Max also asks, are we developing pens with more precision? And would it be possible to see pens with dosage regulation like high-end nicotine vaporizers? In other words, he says, are you working on the pens and their precision?
Okay. We do have a first generation inhaler that we developed ourselves from scratch that essentially will make the, similar to the nicotine field, they'll have cartridges, so it'll be a reusable unit. And with regard to that unit, since there's a chip and electronics on board, it will be much more precise. We're looking at ultimately as that going forward will be the backbone to segue into the medical field. Because namely, like I said, if you're delivering any type of medicine, the dosages need to be beyond precise, 4 nines, as they say in the scientific field. As far as the disposable pens, like I said, currently we'll only put quantities in to the fluid that we know are safe. We're working with our pen manufacturer to essentially look at next generation products, but essentially it's a trade-off between cost currently and how smart a device are we going to put out at this point. So the fallback with regard to your answer of safety is we'll only put out products that we know are safe in quantities that will be safe. I should say that every product comes with instructions. It's not completely random. It's that you get it. It comes with an instruction card that says, for an example, the sleep product, 1 to 3 vapes, 30 minutes before bedtime, and that should suffice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason was wondering whether there are any turnover numbers that you would be able to share yet.
What do you mean by turnover?
Jason, could you clarify a little bit about what you're looking for? Says he's typing. And for all of those of you who are listening, we're going to start wrapping up soon. So if you do have any final questions, please put them into the chat. This would be sort of a last call for questions at this time. Jason, so Jason said, isn't it important for possible investors to know how the turnover numbers are, or am I wrong? No, Jason, you're entirely right. Absolutely. We just need you to clarify what you mean by turnover numbers. What information are you looking for?
Was he talking about like unit sales?
Perhaps. Jason, are you looking for unit sales? Is that what you're interested in? Basically saying, how is the business going currently?
Oh, very good. In terms of unit sales, I wouldn't call it turnover, but yeah, we see our sales tracking higher every month.
Great. All right. Any other questions that anyone has for us? Mohammed wants to know if there are any public finance reports as potential investors.
Well, no, currently we're a private company.
And Max is asking, do you see yourselves opening offline shops?
Meaning like a company-owned store? No, I don't think so at this time. That essentially, the idea is to put it into a distribution network, not maintain the overhead of a retail store, unless it got huge. If we want to open up next to the Apple store in Manhattan, absolutely.
Great. Jason wants to follow up and know if there are any sales numbers available.
We currently don't have any published sales numbers. I'll have to discuss that with the rest of the Aura team about whether we're going to put them out there publicly, because once they're on the internet, then frankly, they'll be in the hands of our competition at some point. I don't necessarily know we want to do that.
Yeah, this sounds like a team decision, but
yeah.
We have a question also from Jamie. What countries do you plan on distributing to in the short and medium term? And as a follow-up, will regulations for this kind of product take a long time to become compliant?
In terms of the countries, I mean, it's fairly wide open. We've had some, I'd say, extensive discussions with the product going into, Southeast Asia. Certainly, there's definite interest. I should say that the regulations in every country with regard to some of the products is different. So our ambitions versus what regulatory environment we're dealing with country to country changes. Certainly, we'd be rather excited to get it into the UK and the EU, but smaller, less developed markets, as long as there's an appetite for the product, we certainly would look. Russia as well. It's pretty much wide open.
Excellent. So it doesn't seem like we have more questions here. So I wanted to thank you for your time, Peter. I think we gave everyone a lot of great answers, and I certainly learned a lot as well.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you all for joining us for this call and this town hall. And we look to having another one soon. All right, everyone. Have a great day.